Okay, so shall we start now? Mihai?
Of course, just a second.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so recording started, and I guess we can roll. So, good afternoon, everyone, and I'm glad to see you all back for another talk. So, Mihai here, another member behind the Birmingham Open Hat team, and today we have with us John McNamara, a senior inventor at the IBM Hursley Laboratories, the IBM UK lead for university programs, and also an honorary professor at Sheffield Hallam University. He brings us today a talk on the theme of the journey from problem to innovation to prototyping. And in this talk, we'll be walking through methods of problem solving, followed by an overview of some extremely consumable technology that enable rapid prototyping without the need to be an expert developer. So John, if you could please take it from here.
Sure, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to come and chat to you all. It's an absolute delight. Let me first of all try and share my slides with you all. And here we go. It's a good start, I think. Begin to present. Hopefully you can see my slides. So my name is John McNamara, working in IBM for quite a while now. My current role is I look after IBM UK university programs in the UK. I also am a newly minted master inventor, and what I wanted to do was to show some of the problem solving techniques that I use to try and solve problems and create patterns, but also beyond that as well in terms of creating proof of concepts. What I wanted to do is to show you some of the really consumable technologies that are out there that help you create things and build things really, really quickly. So first of all, I'd like to share with you an approach to problem solving. Now, one of the big temptations of solving a problem when you first see it is that an obvious solution may come to mind, and you might be very tempted to simply grab hold of it and implement it without really understanding the complexities and the context of the problem. So I'll give you an example. If I've got my car's getting old, it's a bit beaten up and it keeps breaking down and it costs a lot to maintain it, and suddenly it stops working, you might think, well, that's my problem, and I can't get down to the gym, and I can't get into work. What do? Well, get a new car, one that doesn't break down all the time. That certainly would be one. That could certainly be one solution to the problem. But if you look at the problem a bit deeper and try to peel back the layers of what the user really wants, you might find there's a better solution waiting than the obvious one. So the first step really is to identify who has the problem. That's the biggest step, because a lot of times with one particular problem, there are lots of different stakeholders, and you have to get a view as to who you're solving this problem for. And once you've done that, you then have to understand how they view that problem. So, for example, if it was our user who's got a broken down car, they might want to go to the gym, they might do all their shopping online, something all about that, but they want to get into work as well and not get wet and rained on. So that's potentially their needs for a car. And if you look at the as is, if you then break down the as is steps, you can sort of see that if you were to look at it in more detail, that there are problems with things like the cost of the ownership of the car maybe, or the insurance and the tax and the maintenance of the car. And maybe they're unhappy about the reliability as well. And so once you understand the pain points, you can attribute them then to the as-is solution, the as-is model that we're following for the user. And at that point, that gives you the context to start generating ideas to address the points you've discovered. So it might well be that if the user needs this car to go to work in a fairly comfortable way and quickly, but also requires the need to go to the gym, then maybe a bike could be useful in joining a carpool, which would also solve the problems of cost as well. And so once you've got lots of ideas, you can then sort the best from the good. And now there are no bad ideas. And I'm going to go to well, some significant length to try and prove there are no bad ideas, because it's one of those things that you often say and no one believes you. And I think it's true. As long as you're focused on the problem and the user, there really are no bad ideas. I'm going to try and prove that today. And once you've done that, you identify the most appropriate idea to solve the user's problems. So I'm going to go through all these in a little bit more detail with our user, Jim the gardener. Now, Jim, as well as being a gardener, is an unhappy man. So he feels very much like he's in a bit of a rut. Nothing ever changes. He's got no development in his job. He's always on the back foot, reacting to things, and he's frustrated because he has to do lots of rework. He has to move and replant small saplings because a larger, more mature plants are invading the territory, and his back starts to ache because he always seems to be cold and wet when he's planting stuff, and he forever is trudging back and forth to change his tools, and he finds that perhaps a tree is overgrown into an area of the garden that he needs for his saplings, and so fundamentally he believes that he's unproductive, and he's always wandering around, changing his tools, going over rework, cutting back trees and replanting things again and again. And so what can we do to help Jim? So there's a lot of problems there for us to take in around the theme of Jim and his role as a gardener. There are a lot to try and solve them. So how do we make some kind of sense out of that? Well, first of all, we need to understand Jim. So we use something called an empathy map, where we take a look and explore what Jim thinks, what he feels, what he says, what he does. And we start to put those points that Jim raises into those sections. So, for example, Jim thinks, oh, yeah, my back's always aching when it rains. Then soon, when you engage with Jim, you'll find that actually you'll populate this map very quickly indeed. And you begin to get to the nub of the problem that Jim has beyond the potential solutions that Jim thinks he has. You begin to look at the causes and the causes rather than the symptoms, if that makes sense. So Jim may say, well, I need more people to help me. I spend lots of time doing rework. He thinks his work direction is kind of unclear. He's always reacting to stuff, and he always seems to have a cold. He's always out, it's cold and wet. He can't get things planted on time as well because he's always doing all this rework, and he feels like he just can't break out of this rut. He never learns anything new, and so he's pretty miserable. So what do we do next? Now we've identified all these things. What's the next step? Well, the next step now is to jot down, work with Jim on the as-is process, to work through a day in the life. So the first thing Jim does is he goes and he collects his tools that he thinks he's going to need that day in the garden. He may start off with planting the seeds as per his schedule that he's got mapped out. And then he might go and investigate some of the seedlings that have already been planted to make sure they're okay and there's further changeable weather, and also that things aren't going to be invading into their space, as is the case with saplings as well. Make sure they've got enough soil, enough nutrients and moisture to grow. And then for the more mature trees, he's got to make sure that the roots aren't expanding into the areas where the saplings are trying to grow, and the branches don't impede the growth of the new plants and seedlings. If he does all that well, at the end of the day, he's going to be able to collect some really nice fruit. So what do we do with this as-is process? Well, we start to identify points in the process that relate to the pain points that Jim has identified. And fairly soon, you begin to see a pattern evolve in the as-is process where Jim is beginning to have the most of the issues. And also, what those issues actually are. So now, at this point, you've got a solid understanding of the problem that Jim has. You know what his as-is process is like. You know what he thinks about it, what he feels about it, what he does, and what he says about it as well. With all that information, it's then time to do a brainstorming session on potential ideas. Now, remember I said that there were no bad ideas? Well, there's not. So let's say, for example, we work with Jim. We'd say, Jim, what would solve your problem? He said, well, here's the thing, if I ruled the world, I have as many wonderful gardeners as I'd like to come and tend the garden, and it would be fantastic. But the problem that Jim might have in that regard, even though that he would indeed help solve a number of his problems, is that, would he end up in that case losing a certain ownership of the direction of the garden? Would that really be an ideal solution for Jim? And so maybe think, well, okay, maybe I'm going to build a giant underground layer and have a whole thousands of minions that will do my bidding in my garden for me. And you can think about it and think, well, okay, that's something, he does need more people to help him, and it would save his back. But then, would his job change fundamentally from being one of a gardener, something he actually does like to do, to be one kind of like a manager of other people? And also, what guarantees that these minions are going to be any good at gardening? So maybe Jim needs to clone himself. And so all the clones of Jim will have all this gardening knowledge and they'll all work together in absolute harmony. Well, that does sound great, but thinking about it, maybe there's another option there which is similar to that, which could, but maybe a little more practical, which is intelligent robots. Robots are available to go and mow your lawn and plant seeds, so maybe that's a good way forward. But potentially, maybe there's something a little bit cheaper that could do that. Maybe intelligent sensors to let Jim know if things like the soil isn't optimal, if his saplings are getting the right nutrients, if that area for growth is moist enough, or if there are bigger plants taking away those things the saplings need to survive. And then, well, in that case, what do you do with all that data? Well, maybe you need to have some kind of creative design and planning application, take that data in, and it allows Jim to then plan his garden using intelligent data from the garden. So at the beginning of the day, he knows exactly what work he's going to do, he knows what tools he's going to need, and if you link it to the weather, well, he isn't going to go planting in the rain either, so he knows exactly what his wheat is going to entail. And also as well, maybe if we go down this route, a lot of Jim's needs are fulfilled, and that he's no longer in a rut because he's now able to creatively design the direction the garden's going in, as opposed to just reacting to things all the time. So they sound like good ideas. So how to prioritize them? We need a graph. The bottom left-hand corner is where our expensive and complicated ideas go, and then up the top are cheap, and off to the right are simple ideas. We start to put our ideas down in terms of practicality and cost. And so, no surprises, world domination, pretty expensive and fairly complicated, and lots of people have given it a go. And it's not worked out all that well for all those that have tried it. Then there's the idea of, well, clones. Well, yes, probably a bit easier than world domination. But then you start to move into the realm, perhaps a bit more of practicality, of intelligent robots, which could be very possible, but maybe complicated, and also expensive, and also require maintenance. And then maybe further up, well, AI sensors to let Jim know the soil is not optimal. Well, they are available. They're relatively cheap. We can definitely use those. And of course, final idea, which is the creative design and planning app that we're going to give to Jim. And what that means is we then go back to Jim with the ideas, and we say, Jim, we shall, with your consent, design and build for you an app which lets you now creatively design, plan and monitor his gardens. It's linked up to the weather channel, so you can plan when you work and not get wet. It's linked to sensors in the soil, so you know the best place to plant is. Lets you plan more effectively, know which tools you'll need. You don't need to go back and forward to the shed and getting more tools. And you learn something new, get out of your rut and plan your activity and stop doing frustrating unnecessary rework. So now you've got your idea for your proof of concept. The next step is then to gain some requirements from the user about the specifics. And once you have that, there are some tools I'd like to share with you that will allow you to create something really great in a very short amount of time. And the first thing I want to share with you is something called Node-RED. Now, Node-RED's a completely free tool. It's available at the link above at node-red.org. You can download it and run it locally, or you can link up to it in the IBM cloud and use it there. Now, Node-RED is kind of like a visual coding tool where you orchestrate a flow of function from left to right, and you can see visually what your code, what your programs actually do. Now, you can do quite a lot without coding at all. In fact, I'll show you a quick demonstration of one proof of concept, which is quite simple, but it's to effectively parse tweets from Twitter, pick out those tweets which relate to Wimbledon, and then to post those tweets onto a website. Post those tweets into a database for storage, and then take the tweets from that database and post them onto a dynamically created web page. I'm going to show how it's possible to do that in Node-RED in real time and in under, I think, about a minute and a half, which will give you a kind of an idea of the power of this tool and the nodes it has available to it, which actually are really part and parcel of why this tool is so powerful. Because not only to give you a really nice visual canvas to bring functionality and link it together, you've got some fantastic functions on the left-hand side in the guise of nodes, and a lot of these nodes link into IBM technologies. And so rather than having to code it from scratch and then link in, you can drag a node in, and a lot of that coding is done for you. So definitely recommend you have a look at this really great piece of technology. You start playing with it. It's got a great user base. You may well find that when you come to design something, if you look at the user forums and the user repositories, there's probably something in there in terms of flows that you can pick up and reuse at probably 95% of what you want. So it's definitely a wonderful, wonderful resource. So let me show you how it works. So this is effectively our canvas here, and this is where we orchestrate and put together our piece of functionality. I'm going to stop the clock. It's running now. And the first thing we're going to do is bring in something called a Twitter node. Now what this will do is this will parse tweets. I'm going to link it up to our Twitter account, authorize it. There we go. And we're going to do a search for mentions of Wimbledon. I'm going to give the node the name as well. I'm going to get all the tweets that mention Wimbledon. There we go. And the next thing we do, we're going to have a debug node. I'm going to link it up. And so we'll see is, first of all, we deploy it. So it's in runtime, and we'll start to see Node immediately take the tweets from Twitter and post all the ones about Wimbledon into that debug box on the right-hand side. And there we go. We can start seeing them coming through there. Now we bring out a MongoDB database. We give it the IP address of the host. Give it a name, Wimbledon. Away we go. Now, at that point, all of our tweets that are picking up from Twitter are going to be stored on our MongoDB database here. Deploy that, and so that database is going to be populated. Next, we're going to do is try and create ourselves a dynamic web page and then push out those tweets from MongoDB onto the web page. So this is the URL that we're going to host that web page on. Effectively, it'll be your Node-RED URL with the postscript of show tweets. I'm going to link it up to the database. You put in the correct collection name with all the tweets in, give it a name. There we go. And then we're going to create a, there we go, give it a HTTP response node. And so we're now able, when we deploy it, to post those things out automatically onto the web page. Now, if we are now going to go to that URL with show tweets on, which is just going to be added onto our Node-RED URL, show tweets here. and we'll see those tweets and a lot of the metadata around them go directly onto that web page. Now, it's not pretty, but as you can imagine, that's taken about a couple of minutes to do, which I think is pretty impressive. Now, what makes it even more impressive is not just the consumability of the tool itself, but also in terms of the nodes that you can drag in and start to use. And there's a number of Watson API nodes that you can use in here. And I've used these quite a lot to do some things with universities, which have been really quite cool. So Watson Assistant, that's a great node for building, say, for example, a chatbot. So the simplest chatbot you might think of could be one for ordering a pizza, where the chatbot sits there, says, what sort of pizza would you like? Walk you through the toppings, when would you like it, and what base of pizza would you like? And then it walks you through all that and gives the order then to the kitchen, and then they create the pizza for you and deliver it to you. Text to speech and speech to text, they can't do pretty much what they say on the tin. Text to speech will convert any text that you provide to it, very often from Watson Assistant, into speech, and that helps interact more naturally with the user. And again, speech to text is taking input from the user in the form of speech and converting it into text. Tone Analyzer is really useful as well, particularly for more complicated users of Watson Assistant. So you can gauge from the text that's been input into the tool, into the chatbot, or indeed anywhere that you want to consume that data, what the tone is like of that text. So if someone's unhappy, or someone's angry, or they're joyful, you will then get a JSON object back saying, well, this person is 0.9 happy or 0.5 angry. Personality insights sounds a bit similar to Tone Analyzer on the surface, but it's a lot deeper, I think, and great for parties if you have the opportunity to try it out. So the idea is it will take in a lot more text than the Tone Analyzer, and it will then provide back an analysis of that user's personality. It does need quite a lot of text in order to provide a decent analysis, and so very often a very good way of doing this to link up Watson Personality Insights to someone's Twitter ID. Now, there's a great demo online. If you do a search for Watson Demo Personality Insights, you can select lots of people's Twitter IDs and you'll get Watson giving you their personality insights. Discovery is a wonderful tool. So think about it as a kind of like a search functionality, but kind of on steroids, really, because it uses natural language understanding. So say, for example, you wanted to do a search on a document where for instances related to farming. A normal search tool would give you all the occurrences of the word farming or farm in that tool. But using Discovery and its natural language processing, it will give you things like soil or nutrients or vegetables, because it knows they're part of the taxonomy around farming. And also as well, it'll incorporate Tone Analyzer. So you can say things like, show me any instances where risk has been mentioned in the annual report in an angry way or a negative way, and it will find you those snippets of information. Visual recognition, again, does what it says on the tin, and it will effectively tell you what it is that you've presented to the API for visual recognition. Out of the box, it will do quite a lot for you without any training, but there is the option to train it as well. And training is very, very simple too. Although there are some lessons to be learned with that, which are tremendous fun. I'm more than happy to share that with you. So what have we done with those tools? Well, one example prototype we've been doing, and we've done took about a couple of months to build with 3 people from UCL, is an augmented reality AI assistant. Now, you might find in places like hospitals, you've got some extremely talented people, very well qualified, behind a desk, and potentially 30% of what they're asked is, where are the toilets and how do I find Ward B? And it's stuff that, they shouldn't really be having to give their time to. But enter Project Aura. So the idea here is that you could go into IBM or a hospital and you could raise your phone up with the app on. It recognizes an image and a augmented reality avatar will appear in front of you and say, how can I help you? And you can ask the avatar, how do I get to Ward B? And it will do things like if you wanted to make an appointment, it will do that for you, provide direction, answer simple queries. And that uses Watson Assistant, text-speech, speech-to-text, and Node-RED. And there's a plethora of augmented reality tools out there as well that you can link up Watson to. We have a Git repository with the code in it and the documentation. If you're interested, just let me know. More than happy to pass that on. This is a particularly relevant one, particularly now, I think, with COVID. We have a number of people who are fairly elderly living on their own. They are perhaps a bit nervous about going out, their social lives being curtailed because they don't want to spread or contract COVID. So what do we do? How do we help these people who live alone and maybe require a bit more support and help to use technologies like the internet, for example? And I actually helped design this with Imperial College, and we used my dad as a guinea pig for it. And what I wanted to do really, and I guess the same as an awful lot of other people, I wanted to be sure that my dad was okay. So you know, if my dad's routine was interrupted and maybe he was coming down for breakfast when you'd normally expect, I'd like to know about that so I can give them call, make sure it's all right. So what we did was we created a device with Imperial College and we placed it in Dad's kitchen. And when he first came down, the device would detect he was there and say, hello. How's it all going? And it would say something, you know, it's a nice shirt that you've got on today. And it engaged my dad in a conversation proactively rather than waiting for my dad to engage with kind of a more of a dumber sort of less functional device. And it encouraged Dad and other elderly people as well. The idea was to encourage them to give a kind of a log of their day, what they plan to do. So to keep them structuring their day and thinking ahead. And so, you know, my dad would say things like, well, you know, I'm going to go out and potentially do some shopping today. And there's, I might listen to the radio. There's a good commentary, or there's a good interview with Tyson Fury, because I was very into his boxing. They want to listen to, and so pick up on key words that are reused frequently, and it would go and parse the internet and say, well, actually, if you're into boxing, there's a great podcast with Joe Rogan and Tyson Fury that's available on the internet. Why don't we listen to it tonight? The other thing it did as well is it would learn habits. So now, for example, if you came off for breakfast between 7 and 8, you had lunch between 12 and 1, you had your tea at, say, between 6 and 7, it would learn that. And so if you went down by, say, 9:30, it would call out and say, do you need any help? And if you got no response, then a loved one would be contacting, maybe give your uncle, your dad a phone call, make sure that they're okay, which is incredibly handy. And the other thing it did as well was my dad kind of grew up in a small village where there was one phone for the entire village. So by that phone up, it's going to you'd be there for a while talking to him for various things. And I like to use a phone, but I also use things like text and messaging and social media, which of course my dad's probably not going to be using. So there's I'd like to chat more, and I guess we all would, to our relatives. And so what we did was we linked up the Cube to a Twitter ID, and I could quickly text my dad if I was out shopping or doing something and say, are you free for a visit, pre-COVID, the weekend? And then it would go to the Cube and it would light up and tell Dad, say, yeah, are you free for a visit this weekend? My dad could then respond and I get a tweet back saying, yeah, sure, come up, have a beer. And that was done on Node-RED, used Tone Analyzer, visual recognition, Watson Assistant, text-speech, speech-text, incredibly useful tool. That took about 8 weeks to develop. in total. The reason it looks how it is actually as well is because we wanted to fit in with the decor that it was designed to complement. And with a lot of the newer tools, they looked a little bit like they just beamed down from the Enterprise. And so this actually fitted quite nicely in the decor. So it's something that looked kind of familiar. And the design language is kind of around the 1950s, 1960s radio. And so it's something that you can't quite put your finger on why it's so familiar, but the design language is based around that, which is why it kind of looks of its time. This is something I'm particularly proud of. We worked with Sheffield Hallam University on a research project, and the aim of the project was to try and address some of the problems associated with illnesses such as dementia and Alzheimer's. And one of the largest challenges that we have is that so often these illnesses are diagnosed way too late. And very often when they're diagnosed in the latter stages, treatment isn't as effective as it could be. If these illnesses are diagnosed earlier, treatment is much more effective, and the quality of life is increased dramatically for the patient. So one of the reasons that it's not diagnosed earlier is really to do with a couple of things, but mainly one is we don't really have the number of mental health technicians to do the screening that we need to do at volume to capture it early. And the weird thing is about it as well is that the test itself, there's one test called the MOCA test, which leads you to, it can be quite challenging. So there's one portion of the test where you have to do some maths in your head. And if you think about it, if you go to you're going to go for this test, you're probably already feeling a bit vulnerable about your state of mind and your faculties, and you're stood in front of an authority figure. And they say, well, you know, Mr. Smith, would you please count down in multiples of 7 from 100 to 0? You know, a large portion of your brain is given over to, no, golly, I don't want to look like an idiot in front of this really important person. And what's left is doing the math. But here's the revelation. Nobody cares what a robot thinks. So we used Watson Assistant. We used visual recognition, text-speech, speech-text, Node-RED to lead a user through a test similar to the MOCA test. And the idea is that this little robot could sit in a doctor's surgery, a doctor's waiting room, in an alcove somewhere, and much like the blood pressure cuff that's in there, you think, oh, you know, I'm waiting for 20 minutes, I may as well give it a go. You put your arm in, and if there's an issue that needs sorting out, or there potentially could be one, the doctor knows about it, can call you in and resolve it quickly rather than waiting until it causes an actual severe issue. Same with this. If this is sitting there and you think, well, okay, you know, while I'm in, I may as well, you know, talk to this rather, you know, intriguing looking robot. It will very gently take you through the test, and there's nothing wrong, fantastic. But if there is something that could be treated early, it'll notify the mental health technician, who will then bring you in for a test with them. And so the idea is that it filters out all those people that potentially don't need the test. And it allows the mental health technician to focus on those people that do. And that was published in the Journal of Bionic Engineering, which was a real thrill for me, and it won a number of awards as well. But it was built using the tools I've just gone through today. And these tools, they are not complicated to use, but you can do some rather amazing things with them. So where'd you go? Well, what I've done is I've put on this Trello board a link to accessing the technologies I've spoken of. And if you're a student, these are all completely free to use. I've also put in a link to things like guest lecture catalogue and tutorials, many of which have got industry recognised accreditations that you can then share on LinkedIn. So this link here is a great place to start. So next steps. First thing to do if you're a student, or you work for the university or a faculty member, is sign up for the academic initiative. Makes all the stuff I've spoken about completely free. You can then start to download tools like the Watson desktop here, and of course a Trello board to explore and go through all the online tutorials, which is accessed just here as well. I'm sure we'll be able to make these slides available to you after the session. And you can always contact me, johnnymac@uk.ibm.com, and that is a 0 after the J, not an O. Thank you so very much, and I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and thank you. I'm now going to try and pass you back to the organisers. There we go. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, John. That was amazing. Personally, I'm not a tech person, but I thought that was fascinating. This process of design thinking. Does anyone else have a question? Is there something in the chat?
I mean, I'm not a question, but I have to say, John, this was really helpful because the resources that you presented here, I think they could be a starting point for a lot of people here at the hackathon, to start with their own project. Or if they don't have anything in mind yet, it could be an inspiration for the future.
That's very kind of you to say. I must admit, I always like the path of least resistance to solving a problem, and these are some tools that are genuinely really easy to use, and you can do. It's a bit like having a toolkit. I mean, you're never going to run out and build a Formula One racing car potential, but you'll be able to do 95% of the things you could ever want to do with this toolkit, and you can solve some real world problems very, very quickly, and without any expense at all. There's literally no barrier to entry apart from your imagination in terms of what you want to create with these tools. So please let me know how I can support you. I'll be delighted to, and I definitely recommend you go through the Trello board, have a play, get your hands on it, and yeah, have fun. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you again, John. I don't know, aren't there any other questions? It looks like this.
Hi there, John. Good. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, John. That was excellent. I think for anybody who's aspiring to kind of be a problem solver, looking to see how tech might feature in that, this is a really sort of helpful place to start. So, in some senses, you've shown us this fantastic range of tools. Is the idea that as an entrepreneur, you get on with it, you try and solve some simple problems, use the tools, familiarize yourself, and then understand, how do you go from sort of kind of your invention to maybe something that you can actually launch? Would you want to say something about that, John? How do you go from kind of experimenting with the toolkits, solving these really, some of these important problems that need solving?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. So very often you'll find that you'll get an awful lot of I say problems or challenges or ideas that come from industry, and there'll be problems that people encounter but don't really because they're focused on their particular industry, haven't been exposed to the wider set of tools and the problem solving techniques that you're able to pick up. For example, we're using things like Node-RED and Watson, and the idea is that if you can identify and work with the industry around these problems, if you're, say, a startup, for example, you can use these techniques initially to really understand the problem, which is fundamental to all of this, really. And I know because I've done it. You think you know the problem because it sounds like really obvious. I know what I need to do here, and you end up building something and then you present it and go, well, that's not what I wanted at all. Doesn't help me or solve my problem. And very often the user themselves are kind of biased towards what they think the solution should be. So using those tools really strips away the layers of the onion to find out what the user really needs. And that's the first step. The tools themselves then, once you go beyond the slideware of, well, we think you need an app such as Jim the Gardener to create a scheduling system, a monitoring system. Well, rather than just having slideware and then hoping it's all going to be okay, what an awful lot of people want in industry is to have some kind of tangible evidence that what you're suggesting is going to be practical and doable. And so very often you'll be required, or I think it should be kind of almost mandatory, that you'll create a proof of concept. Now, the idea of the proof of concept is that, you know, if you are going to fail, you fail quickly, you change and do something else that's more aligned to the user's needs. And so using things like Node-RED and Watson will allow you to build stuff incredibly quickly. Now, for a proof of concept, it doesn't need to be particularly pretty. It doesn't need to be particularly nailed down to a particular theme, but it must demonstrate that it can solve the problem, that it is going to be usable and workable and fit for purpose, and that the technology is out there with time and effort could provide a really good solution. And the POC stage is all about doing that. And those, you can put something together, I mean, really quickly. I mean, we just did a very quick demonstration of using Watson and creating a web page in about a minute and a half. But a lot of the solutions or POCs that we showed today were done in a matter of a few weeks, with people using part-time who very often weren't coders at all. Some were doing, they were all really bright, but some were electrical engineers that were having to get to know these tools in order to provide this proof of concept. So once you've got the POC and you go back to industry and they say, yeah, no, we like that, that's something that we're kind of willing to invest in and put some funding behind. You can then go on to develop your prototype, which is a bit more polished, a bit more like something you bring out into a commercial environment. Now, actually, IBM's got some pretty good initiatives for that. Something called Startup with IBM. And so Startup with IBM is a initiative where if you're a startup, and startup means you either got less than $1 million of revenue a year or less than 5 years old, you can sign up and you get, I think it starts with about $1,000 of free IBM cloud credit per month. So basically all of your infrastructure and your development platform is taken care of, and you can just get on and build something. And so I think that's probably the narrative all the way from idea to prototype. And once you've got that prototype, you're in kind of a business then, because then you can tweak and refine it and commercialize it. Oh, I've just seen a question from Adam. What does day-to-day activities Master Inventor entail? Golly, well, that's a great question. A lot, as it turns out, a lot of things. So first of all, there's obviously you need to solve problems and create patents, which is a real joy to do because it's a really fun experience. The other thing is that you help other people develop them as well, and a lot of it is about mentorship. A lot of it is about bringing people into your wing and giving them the benefit of your own failings, really. So where you've fallen into pitfalls, saying, well, actually, I did these 5 things. They weren't very good. Don't do that, but do this instead. This is what I found most useful. And it's really helping people leapfrog you in terms of getting to where they want to be quicker. And I think that's the idea really of mentorship, and mentorship is a huge part of the Master Inventor program. You need a certain number of patents for the Master Inventor. You need to have a certain number of visible projects and a certain number of people that you've helped as well. And it's great because it's a skill that I don't think is particularly, once you get a good feel for the process, it's like most things. It's not particularly hard to do, but it's a really good skill to have because you can use it, everywhere, from problem solving, what's gone wrong with my laptop, to developing a robot to help people diagnose dementia or Alzheimer's more rapidly than before. So yeah, that's pretty much it. There are some less than awesome bits. There's a lot of paperwork involved in it as well, and and there's working with lawyers to craft out what it is you're trying to say in rigorous terms. But on the whole, it's pretty awesome. I really enjoy it. Any other questions at all? Although I know we're probably tiptoeing towards the end of the session. If it's useful, what I will do, instead of being brave, I'm going to put the links that I've put on the presentation in the chat, so you can go and explore them right away without having to wait for me to make the slides available, which I will do. So I would start IBM Academic Initiative. If you go on there and you register, it gives you access to pretty much all the technologies that IBM has. You can download them and play with them for free, and also gives you access via a voucher code to the IBM cloud. And that's really great because, when I was at university and I wanted to build something, the first thing I needed was a machine that I was humming away under my bed. I couldn't really afford to run. I had to download software from somewhere. I need to buy it, and I have to then learn to configure it and then learn how to use it properly. And that's a huge barrier to entry. With using this, you get free access to the technologies, but also to the cloud. So all you need really is a laptop with a browser to get access to the stuff and start creating right away. In terms of the Trello board, and these are really cool technologies to play with. Here are the tutorials, which are Yes, there are indeed. So on the Trello board I've just provided, I've got in there a link to the technology downloads and to the IBM cloud, which you get through a voucher code once you register. And the Trello board, if you move from left to right, will kind of lead you through design thinking, as we've kind of gone through today, but also IBM cloud, Watson, Node-RED, IoT, data science, and it kind of moves on into the realms of quantum as well. And alongside these tutorials, many of them have industry recognized accreditations. So as soon as you do them, you'll get a link to an IBM acclaimed badge saying, you have achieved this level of competence in AI, and you can then post that on your LinkedIn or your CV. So for people to look at and recognize you've done it. And that's something that we use actually within IBM. We go for promotions, we need to have lots of these things. And the same, they are respected and recognized outside of IBM as well. So, yeah, that's me. Thank you all very much for your patience and kindness, and look forward to hopefully to working with you all soon. Take care.
Thank you, John. It was a really great session and so many great resources that you showed us. And I'm pretty sure everyone here at the hack is gonna give it a go to the link that you shared. So I guess this is us. The last Inspire session for Birmingham Open Hack. Next up is gonna be the rewards, and we conclude for this year. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, John, and see you all later.
Toodaloo. All the best.
Stop this. There we go.